All right, today we're opening up a fascinating case file. We're going on a hunt for a genetic culprit behind one of the most common and honestly mysterious conditions out there, migraines.
It's a question millions of people ask themselves, right? Is it just random bad luck, or is there something deeper, something written right into our own genetic code that makes some of us way more susceptible? Well, it looks more and more like the answer is hiding in our DNA. So we're going to follow the scientific detectives as they track down the evidence, piecing together all the genetic clues behind this really complex condition.
And let's be clear, the stakes here are incredibly high. This isn't just about a bad headache. According to global health studies, migraine is the third most debilitating disorder in the entire world. That's exactly why cracking this genetic case is so important.
Okay, so our investigation focuses on one prime genetic suspect, a gene called eNOS. Now, it's been a person of interest in migraine cases before, but the evidence, well, it's been a little all over the place.
So to understand the eNOS gene, we first have to get to know what it produces. And that's a molecule called nitric oxide. Just think of it as a tiny biological messenger. Its main job is to tell your blood vessels, hey, relax, open up a bit. It's a process called vasodilation, and it's absolutely essential for controlling our blood flow.
This image here shows us the whole operation. Up top, in Part A, that's the eNOS gene itself. It's the blueprint. And that blueprint holds the instructions for an enzyme. Now, if you look down at Part C, you can see that enzyme doing its job. It takes a substance called L-arginine and, like a little chemical factory, turns it into that super important molecule, nitric oxide. And this is a brilliant illustration of what happens next. That nitric oxide, made inside the endothelial cell at the top, just pops over to its neighbor, a smooth muscle cell, and delivers its message. Relax. The muscle listens, the blood vessel widens, and voila, blood flow is perfectly regulated. It's an amazing system when it works. But what happens if there's a little error, a typo in that genetic blueprint? Could one tiny variation in the eNOS gene mess up this whole chain reaction? Could it affect nitric oxide levels and maybe trigger a migraine? Well, that is the central question our scientific detectives are trying to answer.
Now, this is where the case starts to get a little tricky. See, a whole bunch of individual studies have looked at this gene, but they've come back with totally contradictory results. So to solve the mystery, researchers really needed a way to see the big picture.
They used a super powerful tool called a meta-analysis. Here's an easy way to think about it. A single study is like one witness report. It's a valuable clue, yeah, but it could be biased or just incomplete. A meta-analysis, on the other hand, is like the head detective bringing all the witnesses into one room, comparing all their stories to find the most consistent, most reliable pattern.
And believe me, this was a serious investigation. You can see from this flowchart, the team started out with 123 different studies, potential leads. They meticulously screened every single one, getting rid of duplicates, reviews, irrelevant stuff, until they were left with a core group of 15 high-quality witness reports to analyze.
So after putting all that data together and searching for that definitive pattern, what was the verdict on the eNOS gene? Well, the results were actually pretty surprising and very specific.
First up, a big twist. One specific typo in the eNOS gene, a variant with the tag RS743506, didn't actually increase the risk of migraines. It actually seemed to be protective. It showed up less often in people who get migraines. How about that?
But then they found the smoking guns. Two other variants were tied to a significantly increased risk of migraines. It really seemed like they had found their culprits. But, and this is a huge but, here's the crucial detail. This increased risk wasn't for all migraines across the board. Nope, it was found specifically in the subgroup of people who experience migraine with aura. That's the type where people see things like flashing lights right before the headache hits.
This table really lays out the verdict clearly. You can see that first variant, RS743506, has a protective effect for migraines in general. But for the other two, the connection only becomes significant when you zoom in on migraine with aura. For migraines as a whole, not so much.
So, case closed, right? We've got a protective gene and two risk genes for a specific type of migraine. Well, in science, it's just not that simple. The bar for proof is set extremely high.
And in fact, the researchers themselves end their own report with this big dose of scientific reality. even with these fascinating findings, they conclude that, hey, we need more studies before we can make a final judgment call.
And this chart shows us exactly why the case isn't closed. It uses a really neat technique called trial sequential analysis. Okay, think of the red lines as a statistical finish line. The squiggly line in the middle tracks how strong the evidence is as more studies get added. For the results to be truly conclusive, that line has to cross one of those red boundaries. But as you can see, it hasn't. It's still in the "we need more data" zone.
And really, that's the key takeaway from this whole genetic investigation. The clues pointing to the eNOS gene are super compelling, especially for migraine with aura. But the evidence, even though it's strong, just hasn't met that highest statistical bar to say the case is definitively closed.
This whole case file is a perfect example of how science really works. It's this patient process of gathering clues and building evidence step by step. The hunt for the genes behind migraines is definitely not over, which leaves us with a final, really fascinating question. What other secrets about our health, our bodies, and our lives are just waiting to be discovered, hidden inside our own DNA?